Previously, we examined the tortures endured by Bilal ibn Rabah and many of the other companions, particularly those who were not members of the Quraysh, but rather from the Mawali, the slave class, who were afforded no protection by Meccan society. This naturally leads to the question, did the Prophet Muhammad himself suffer any physical torment or pain during this period? There is no doubt that the Prophet endured significant emotional suffering, and was the subject of relentless smear campaigns. However, did he experience physical torture? The Quraysh, for the most part, refrained from inflicting physical harm upon the Prophet due to the protection he received from his clan. Nevertheless, this did not mean that he was entirely immune to physical harm. Numerous incidents from this early period reveal that the Prophet did indeed suffer physical attacks. Sometimes, in his divine wisdom, Allah protected him. At other times, for reasons known only to Allah, he was not shielded from harm. One such incident involves Abu Jahl, who once boasted to his peers in Quraysh, swearing by al-Lat and al-Uzza that if he saw the Prophet praying again, he would place his foot on the Prophet's neck and throw dust upon him. The Prophet was one of the few who dared to pray publicly in front of the Kaaba, while most Muslims prayed in private. This act of defiance greatly irritated the Quraysh. One day, when the Prophet was in prostration, sujud, Abu Jahl approached him, intending to carry out his threat. However, as he neared the Prophet, those around him witnessed an extraordinary scene. Abu Jahl suddenly recoiled, stepping back and pushing his hands away as if to ward off an unseen force. When he returned to his companions, they asked him what had happened, to which Abu Jahl responded that he had seen a pit of fire and wings hovering between him and the Prophet. The Prophet later explained to the Muslims that the fire and wings Abu Jahl saw were those of the angels sent by Allah to protect him. Had Abu Jahl taken one more step, the angels would have torn him to pieces. Following this incident, Allah revealed the concluding verses of Surah al-Hikmah, condemning the actions of those who attempt to hinder his servant from worship. The verses emphasize that such individuals, like Abu Jahl, are under Allah's watchful gaze and will be seized with divine might if they persist in their wrongful actions. The passage from Surah al-Hikmah encapsulates this divine protection. No, indeed. If he does not desist, we will certainly drag him by the forelock, a lying, sinful forelock. 96, 15-16. The Quran here alludes to the ultimate power and control Allah has over such individuals, reducing them to mere creatures at His mercy, much like an animal controlled by its forelock. This incident is but one of the many hardships the Prophet faced, a reminder of the trials that come with the path of prophethood and the unyielding protection from Allah when needed. Thus, Allah declares, "Let him summon his supporters, we will call forth our angels." This signifies the divine assistance that will be provided, rendering the threats of the disbelievers futile. Therefore, Allah reassures the Prophet, instructing him, "Do not concern yourself with him, continue your prostration and draw closer to your Lord." This divine commandment encapsulates the essence of Surah al-Hikmah, where the Prophet Muhammad is in a state of prostration, while Abu Jahl attempts to obstruct him. It is for this reason that Allah revealed, "Have you seen the one who tries to stop a servant when he prays?" A clear reference to Abu Jahl's failed efforts. In this instance, Allah, in His infinite wisdom, chose to protect His messenger, safeguarding him from harm. Another narration, as conveyed by Urwa ibn az-Zubayr, further illustrates these trials. It is important to note that Urwa himself was not a companion, as he was born shortly after the Prophet's demise. He was the son of az-Zubayr ibn al-Awam, a cousin of the Prophet, and Asma bint Abi Bakr, the Prophet's sister-in-law. His aunt was Aisha, and his older brother was the renowned companion, Abdullah ibn az-Zubayr. Despite his illustrious lineage, Urwa did not attain the status of a Sahabi due to his youth. Urwa once inquired of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, another prominent companion from Mecca, asking him to recount the most egregious act he had witnessed against the Prophet in Mecca. This inquiry reflects the natural curiosity of those who lived during that era, eager to learn first-hand accounts of the trials faced by the Prophet. Abdullah ibn Amr recounted a harrowing incident where the Prophet was praying beside the Kaaba, and Uqba ibn Abi Mu'ayt, one of the most vile and ignoble enemies of Islam, approached him from behind. Uqba, notorious for his cruelty, removed his garment, a type of cloak or shawl, and cast it around the Prophet's neck, proceeding to strangle him with it. The Prophet struggled, but none of the bystanders intervened. It was only when Abu Bakr was informed of the attack that he rushed to the scene, forcefully striking Uqba to release his grip. Abu Bakr then exclaimed, "Will you kill a man simply because he declares that his Lord is Allah?" This poignant declaration by Abu Bakr was later immortalized in the Quran, where Allah says, "Would you kill a man for saying, 'My Lord is Allah,' while he has brought you clear proofs from your Lord?" The verse stands as a testament to Abu Bakr's unwavering support for the Prophet and as a vivid illustration of the hardships endured by the early Muslims. This incident, along with many others, underscores the severe opposition faced by the Prophet and his companions during the early days of Islam. Despite the immense pressure, their resolve remained unshaken, bolstered by divine support and their unyielding faith in Allah. Allah, the Exalted, quotes the words of Abu Bakr in the Quran, underscoring the exceptional status of Abu Bakr among the companions. Unlike other Sahaba, whose noble actions are acknowledged collectively, Abu Bakr is uniquely distinguished by divine testimony, where Allah explicitly refers to him as the companion of the Prophet. This indirect but clear mention in the verse, when he said to his companion, highlights Abu Bakr's unparalleled closeness to the Prophet and his esteemed rank. Notably, the only other companion explicitly named in the Quran is Zayd, further underscoring the unique stature of Abu Bakr. During a critical moment, Allah willed that Abu Bakr would come to the Prophet's aid, shielding him from grave harm. Such instances were not isolated, as the Prophet endured both physical and emotional torment at the hands of his adversaries. While some attempts were lethal in intent, others sought to inflict deep emotional and psychological wounds. One of the most harrowing accounts is narrated by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, a witness to the cruel persecution faced by the Prophet. Ibn Mas'ud, belonging to the slave class, was powerless to intervene, as any attempt on his part would have resulted in immediate execution. He recounts that the Prophet was once praying in front of the Kaaba, a frequent sight for such public attacks meant to humiliate and disgrace him. On this occasion, Abu Jahl and a group of his like-minded peers were gathered nearby. The previous day, a camel had been sacrificed, a rare event that occurred every few weeks. Abu Jahl, in a vile display of hatred, challenged his companions, asking who among them would fetch the discarded entrails of the camel from the refuse heap outside Mecca and cast them upon the Prophet while he was in prayer. The challenge was taken up by the most despicable among them, Uqba ibn Abi Mu'ayt, whose cruelty surpassed even that of Abu Jahl. Despite his status as a nobleman of Quraysh, Uqba did not hesitate to defile himself by handling the rotting, putrid remains of the camel. He carried the foul substance, dripping with blood and filth, through the streets of Mecca. As the Prophet was engrossed in his lengthy prayer, oblivious to the machinations behind him, Uqba waited for the moment when the Prophet would prostrate. As soon as the Prophet fell into sujud, Uqba approached and dumped the entire load of entrails onto his head and back. The weight of the carcass was so immense that the Prophet could not lift himself out of prostration. Ibn Mas'ud describes how the onlookers erupted into uproarious laughter, some doubling over with amusement, others slapping their thighs in fits of mockery. Meanwhile, Ibn Mas'ud stood helplessly at a distance, acutely aware of his inability to assist. The Prophet remained in prostration, pinned down by the weight, until a kind-hearted person, whose name is not recorded, informed Fatima, the Prophet's young daughter, of the situation. At this time, Fatima was no more than 8 or 9 years old. Overcome with distress, she ran to her father and, weeping, removed the filth from his back. Once freed from the burden, the Prophet rose, turned to face his tormentors, and with a solemn expression, raised his finger towards the heavens. The sight of the Prophet in such a state silenced his persecutors, as he began to invoke Allah's wrath upon them by name. O Allah, deal with Abu Jahl. O Allah, deal with Uqba ibn Abi Mu'ayt. The Prophet Muhammad invoked Allah's curse upon each of his tormentors, repeating their names 3 times. As he did so, the color drained from their faces, leaving them deathly pale. The individuals he named included Abu Jahl, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, Shayba ibn Rabi'ah, Walid ibn Uqba, and Uqba ibn Abi Mu'ayt. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who narrated this incident, mentioned a 7th individual whose name he could not recall. Ibn Masud then swore by the one who sent Muhammad with the truth, that he personally witnessed each of these 7 lying dead on the battlefield of Badr, the first major engagement between the Muslims and the Quraysh. Allah's judgment had indeed been executed upon them, demonstrating that those devoid of any nobility or goodness were not spared. Their hearts, utterly sealed from mercy, met the fate they deserved. The severity of the Quraysh's animosity eventually escalated to discussions of assassination. According to Ibn Ishaq's narrative, rumors of an assassination plot reached Fatima, the Prophet's daughter, from a concerned neighbor. Fatima, alarmed, rushed home to inform her father of the impending danger. The Prophet reassured her, saying, "Do not fear, for Allah, the Exalted, will protect me." He then performed ablution, prayed to Allah, and confidently walked to the mosque. This event took place toward the end of the Meccan period, a time when the Quraysh's hostility had reached its peak, culminating in the 8th, 9th, and 10th years of the Prophet's mission. The Quraysh had prepared their weapons, ready to carry out their murderous intentions. However, when the Prophet entered the mosque, not one of them could move. They were paralyzed, unable to stand or carry out their plot. The Prophet then took some sand and threw it at their faces, saying, "May these faces be cursed." It is noted that all those who were present at this incident were later killed at the Battle of Badr. Numerous other incidents of such nature occurred, although they cannot all be recounted here due to their sheer number. However, these examples underscore the fact that the Prophet Muhammad endured both physical and emotional torment throughout his mission. This leads to a profound question. Why were the Prophet and his followers, who were divinely favored, subjected to such severe trials? If we believe that the Prophet Muhammad is the best of all prophets and that his followers are the best of all followers, why then did Allah allow them to suffer so greatly? What wisdom lies in such persecution and hardship? Why did Allah not protect the believers, grant them immediate victory, and establish the Islamic State in Mecca without delay? This is not a question unique to Islam. Even the followers of Jesus Christ endured persecution under Roman rule, and the followers of Moses suffered under Pharaoh. Why did those who stood on the side of truth and divine guidance face such intense suffering? The answer lies in understanding the purpose of human existence. Allah did not create us to live a life of ease and comfort in this world. Our purpose extends beyond this temporal existence to the next life. Allah states in the Quran, "He who created death and life to test you as to which of you is best indeed." Every human being experiences both joy and sorrow, moments of laughter and moments of tears. These trials serve as reminders that we were not created merely to live in this world but to prepare for the hereafter. One of the profound wisdoms behind such trials is to enable the believers to earn Allah's mercy, which ultimately leads to paradise. Although paradise is too precious to be earned by a lifetime of good deeds, Allah magnifies the small acts of goodness we perform and, through His mercy, grants us entry into His eternal paradise. It is within Allah's divine wisdom to test humanity, distinguishing those who are steadfast in their faith and deserving of the eternal blessings of the hereafter from those who are not. In Surah Al-Ankabut, Allah declares, "Do people think that they will be left alone upon saying, 'We believe,' without being tested? Verily, we tested those before them, and through these trials, Allah will surely know those who are truthful and those who are liars." Quran 29, 2-3. Likewise, in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 214, Allah admonishes, "Do you think you will enter paradise without such trials as came to those who passed away before you? They were afflicted with suffering and adversity and were so shaken that even the messenger and those who believed with him cried out, 'When will the help of Allah come?' Verily, the help of Allah is always near." Quran 2, 214. An illustrative example of such trials is the case of Khabbab ibn al-Arat, who was severely tortured by his owner, Ammar. She would heat iron in the furnace and use it to brand his back. Despite enduring such agony, one day Khabbab approached the Prophet Muhammad and implored, "O Messenger of Allah, for how long shall we suffer like this? Why don't you pray to Allah to help us against these people?" The Prophet, who was resting against the Kaaba, straightened himself to underscore the significance of his response. He reassured Khabbab by quoting the Quranic verse, "Indeed, with hardship comes ease." Quran 94, 6. This implies that ease will inevitably follow difficulty, But even the prophets were not granted divine favors without effort. They, too, had to endure trials to earn Allah's blessings. This enduring struggle serves as a powerful lesson for later generations. If the prophets and their companions faced severe hardships, it reinforces the understanding that the righteous path requires perseverance. The Prophet Muhammad and his companions, through their suffering, demonstrated their superiority and resilience. This is not merely theoretical. Their actions during these trials are a testament to their piety and commitment. The companions, particularly those who converted in Mecca, held a higher status than those who embraced Islam later, as Allah grants preference based on the level of faith. The early convert are regarded as the best among the Muslims due to their early and firm commitment. Furthermore, the struggles faced by the Prophet and his companions provide timeless examples and guiding lights for later generations. When confronted with trials and tribulations, believers can find solace and inspiration in the experiences of the early Muslims of Mecca, who endured unprecedented persecution. Their resilience serves as a model for all who face hardships in their own lives. As the Muslim community in Mecca grew, reaching approximately 20 to 30 members, the Prophet recognized the need for a secure place to congregate. At that time, the Kaaba, despite its sanctity, was surrounded by idols and did not provide a safe haven for the Muslims, many of whom were secret converts. Some had not even revealed their faith to their masters or families, particularly those who were slaves. In response to this need, the Prophet chose the house of al-Arqam ibn Abi al-Arqam, a decision of great significance. Al-Arqam's house, known as Dar al-Arqam, became the first center of Islamic learning and worship. This marked a historical moment in the history of Islam, providing the early Muslims with a private and secure place to gather, learn, and pray, laying the foundation for the establishment of the first mosque in Islam, Masjid Quba, built later in Medina. The house of al-Arqam ibn Abi al-Arqam became the designated meeting place for the early Muslims. Although the exact year of this development is not specified, it likely occurred around the middle of the third or the beginning of the fourth year after the Prophet Muhammad began his public mission. This timeline coincides with the period shortly after the Dawah invitation to Islam was made public, following 3 years of secrecy during which conversions were minimal. Once the Dawah went public, persecution escalated, necessitating a secure place for the believers to gather. The Prophet chose the house of al-Arqam for this purpose. The question arises as to why the Prophet selected al-Arqam's house specifically. The early biographies of the Prophet do not explicitly state the reasons, but by examining the background of al-Arqam, we can infer several key factors. Firstly, al-Arqam hailed from a noble lineage within the Quraysh tribe, specifically the Banu Makhzum. This tribe was known for its rivalry with the Banu Hashim, the Prophet's own tribe. By choosing the house of a Makhzumi, the Prophet strategically minimized suspicion, as the tribal rivalries of the time would have made it unlikely for others to suspect that a Makhzumi would assist a Hashimi. Moreover, al-Arqam was among the earliest converts to Islam, reportedly within the first 10 individuals to embrace the new faith. His early and outstanding commitment made him a trustworthy and reliable ally, crucial for maintaining the secrecy of the meetings held at his home. The importance of trust cannot be overstated, as this location was to serve as a clandestine center for the nascent Muslim community in Mecca. Additionally, according to some reports, al-Arqam had inherited this property from his father, and he was a young man, likely in his late teens, around 18 or 19 years old. The youthful age of al-Arqam further contributed to the disguise, as one would not typically expect a young man to be so audacious as to harbor a group of believers under the watchful eyes of the Quraysh. In the 5th year of the Prophet Muhammad's mission, the escalating persecution and relentless torment endured by his followers led him to propose a solution. He advised those who were suffering most to seek refuge in Abyssinia, a neighboring land governed by a just Christian king. This monarch, known for his fairness, would allow them to practice their faith without interference. This pivotal moment occurred in the month of Rajab, marking a critical juncture in the early days of Islam. By this time, the Prophet's message had gone public, and in less than a year and a half, his followers were subjected to severe hardships. The persecution grew so intense that in the 5th year of the Prophet's mission, which corresponds to approximately 7 years before the Hijrah, the migration to Medina, he sanctioned the first migration to Abyssinia. It is crucial to understand that this was a time when the concept of migration was fraught with immense challenges. The ancient world was not as connected as it is today, and relocating meant leaving behind not only one's home but also the protection and security afforded by one's tribe. In those days, the majority of people lived and died within a small radius of where they were born, often never venturing far from their ancestral homes. In Mecca, the situation was even more precarious. The tribal system was deeply ingrained, and one's survival was intricately linked to their tribal affiliation. Moving to another city or land was not just a physical transition but a complete detachment from the protective umbrella of the tribe. Without this connection, one was vulnerable to plunder, assault, and exploitation, with no legal or societal structures to offer protection. The prospect of migrating to Abyssinia, a foreign land with a different culture and language, was daunting. The Sahaba companions of the Prophet were instructed to relocate to a land where they would be strangers in every sense, geographically, culturally, and linguistically. Unlike today, where wealth can be transferred through banks and investments can be secured remotely, these early Muslims had no such means. Their assets were tied to their property in Mecca, and in the process of fleeing, they were forced to abandon much of their wealth, suffering significant financial losses. When the Prophet gave the command to migrate, 15 individuals answered his call, 11 men and 4 women. Among the first to embark on this journey were Uthman ibn Affan and his wife Ruqayya, the daughter of the Prophet. Their migration was followed by other notable companions, including Abdur Rahman ibn Awf and Salama. The difficulty of this migration underscores the severity of their situation in Mecca and the strength of their faith, as they chose the uncertain refuge of Abyssinia over the familiarity of their homeland. Despite the perilous journey and the uncertainty of what awaited them in Abyssinia, these early Muslims undertook the migration with the hope of finding a safe haven where they could practice their faith freely. Some reports suggest that their departure was secretive, and they made their way to the port of Jeddah, from where they boarded a ship to Abyssinia. Other accounts imply that their intentions were known, but regardless of the circumstances, their migration marked a significant chapter in the early history of Islam. If the accounts are accurate, then there is nothing surprising in the Quraysh's initial lack of reaction to the early emigration. At this stage, the Quraysh were not anticipating such a move and, consequently, had little reason to obstruct it. Although later they would become vigilant, it is plausible that the departure was made public without significant opposition. One notable hadith supports this notion, recounting an event that reveals a different side of a key figure involved in the migration. This particular incident involves one of the 4 couples among the emigrants, Layla and her husband. According to the narration, Layla was openly preparing for the journey to Abyssinia, packing her belongings and loading her camel in plain view. This act was not conducted in secrecy, as she was clearly seen by others, including a member of the Quraysh named Umar ibn al-Khattab, who happened to pass by. Noticing her preparations, he inquired, "Where are you traveling to?" Given that travel was a rare and significant event, this question was naturally prompted by curiosity. In response, Layla, likely exasperated by the relentless persecution, responded curtly. However, what surprised her was the unexpected compassion she detected in Umar's eyes. He expressed a rare moment of empathy, saying, "Has the situation truly become so dire?" This reaction suggested that even he, despite his harsh treatment of the Muslims, had not fully grasped the severity of their suffering. He then offered a simple prayer for her safety, saying, "May Allah be with you," before continuing on his way. This encounter left Layla astonished, for it revealed a side of Umar that she and others had never seen before. Following her husband's return, Layla eagerly recounted the incident, noting Umar's unexpected display of compassion. Her husband, however, dismissed it with scorn, cynically remarking, "Do you really think he will show mercy to us or accept Islam? The donkeys of his father's house will embrace Islam before he does." Yet, within 2 years, Umar himself embraced Islam, highlighting the profound change that can occur in even the most seemingly hardened individuals. This episode underscores a deeper truth about Umar's character. Despite his outward sternness and severity, there existed within him a capacity for softness and empathy, traits that would later become evident when he struck his own sister in anger, only to be deeply moved upon realizing her steadfast faith. This duality in his nature is reflective of the broader principle that Allah guides whom He wills, often in ways that defy human expectations. Interestingly, the first wave of immigrants to Abyssinia comprised individuals of higher social status, while those of lower status, particularly the slaves, were unable to flee. The slaves, bound by their lack of political and social freedom, remained trapped in their circumstances, unable to seek refuge elsewhere. This reality highlights the tragic irony that those who were most in need of escaping persecution were the very ones who lacked the means to do so. Among the emigrants were several notable figures, all of whom were from the noble class of the Quraysh. This demographic distinction illustrates the complex social dynamics of the time. The elite, although less persecuted than others, recognized the opportunity to alleviate their suffering and took advantage of it. This decision underscores the importance of self-preservation. There is wisdom in seeking safety when possible, rather than enduring unnecessary hardship simply because others may be suffering more severely. The actions of these early emigrants remind us of the pragmatic need to protect oneself while maintaining faith and resilience in the face of adversity. There is nothing unusual in the Prophet instructing those with political means to emigrate, even though there were others who needed to emigrate more desperately. The reality was that only those capable of leaving could do so, thereby making the best out of an unfortunate situation. In Arabic, there is a legal maxim that applies here: one must choose the lesser of two evils. This principle teaches that while it is impossible to save everyone, those who have the opportunity to escape suffering should do so. Allowing them to find refuge and lead better lives elsewhere does not mean that those left behind must endure unnecessary hardship if they cannot leave. This situation also highlights an essential point: not all lands under non-Muslim rule are alike. Some regions allow for peaceful existence and the freedom to worship Allah, while others are hostile. Abyssinia was a land where Muslims could live and practice their faith freely, in stark contrast to Mecca. This distinction is particularly relevant in contemporary times, underscoring that certain lands offer the necessary freedom to practice religion, and in such places, Muslims should remain law-abiding citizens. This model, as demonstrated by the early Muslim community in Abyssinia, can be particularly instructive for Muslims living as minorities in non-Muslim countries today. In Abyssinia, the Muslims were not plotting against the Najashi, the title of the Abyssinian ruler, much like Caesar for Roman emperors. They entered the country legally, akin to holding a visa, which permitted them to live, worship, and integrate into society without facing any obstacles. This experience offers a model that can be emulated by Muslims in similar situations elsewhere. While some extremists argue that living in non-Muslim lands is impermissible, Quran, the example of the Muslims in Abyssinia, provides a counter-narrative. Their sole purpose in Abyssinia was to secure the freedom to worship Allah without political ambitions, and they remained there for more than a decade, even 7 years after the Hijrah, when the Muslim state had already been established in Medina. This continuity highlights the presence of a thriving community of believers in Abyssinia, even when a fully functioning Islamic state existed elsewhere. If Muslims could live in such a land during those times, it is unreasonable to claim that it is impermissible to reside in a land today where the freedom to worship Allah is guaranteed. Furthermore, it is noteworthy that the Prophet described the Najashi, whose real name was Asahama, as a just king. His justice stemmed from his refusal to persecute his subjects or interfere with their religious practices, thereby upholding the freedom to worship, which is a crucial aspect of justice in any society. Form a just kingdom is one that upholds fairness and justice, as demonstrated by the Christian king whom the Prophet praised for his just governance. This commendation is significant, particularly given that the king was not Muslim but still recognized for allowing religious freedom. Some narrow-minded individuals mistakenly believe that an ideal Islamic state would strictly enforce religious conformity, denying freedom to non-Muslims. However, the Prophet's praise for this Christian ruler indicates the importance of religious freedom, even within a non-Muslim context. It is worth considering whether a Christian king could be praised for granting religious freedom while some assert that such freedom should not be extended under Islamic rule. The Prophet's acknowledgement of the Najashi as a just ruler because he refrained from persecuting people for their faith raises important questions about the nature of governance in an Islamic state. The ideal Islamic government does not possess the authority to ban other religions. Historically, non-Muslim minorities have always existed within Muslim lands, such as the Coptic Christians in Egypt, who have preserved their religious practices for over 14 centuries. The laws governing religious practices may have differed, but the essence remains that an Islamic government cannot prohibit the practice of other religions. Scholars have debated whether this protection applies only to Judaism and Christianity or extends to other religions as well. The correct view is that it applies universally. For instance, when Muslims conquered Persia, the Prophet did not limit religious tolerance to Jews and Christians, the people of the book, but also extended it to the Zoroastrians, who worship fire. Consequently, the principle of religious tolerance in Islam is inclusive, even extending to paganism, as was the practice of the Mughal rulers in India. While proselytizing may be restricted, the right to practice one's faith in designated places of worship is protected under Islamic law. This stands in contrast to the misconception held by some non-Muslims and overzealous Muslims alike that Islam seeks to impose religious conformity. On the contrary, Islam guarantees the freedom to practice any faith within an Islamic state. One of the reasons Abyssinia was chosen as a refuge for early Muslims is that it was ruled by a just king who allowed freedom of worship. Additionally, Abyssinia was familiar to both the Quraysh and the Muslims due to existing trade relations, making it a practical destination. It was also geographically accessible, requiring only a short journey from Jeddah to the Abyssinian coast, further facilitated by its proximity compared to other potential refuges like Yemen or Rome. Furthermore, the fact that Abyssinia was a Christian kingdom was significant. Christians, as described in the Quran, are generally regarded as the people most inclined towards Muslims, sharing a common reverence for Jesus Christ. Historically, Christians have demonstrated greater tolerance and openness than other religious groups, which is why Abyssinia was considered a suitable refuge. These narratives form part of the broader history of the early persecution faced by the Muslims, which we will explore in further detail later. However, it is also crucial to consider the final tactic employed by the Quraysh against the nascent Muslim community, the boycott. This strategy will be discussed at length in upcoming video.